Hi friends, this is Manish Pandey. Welcome back to my series on UiPath Data Service. In our last video, you learned how to use create entity record activity in UiPath. Now in this video, I'm going to show you two things. First, I will show you how to create multiple entity records in the data service using create entity record activity. Second thing I'm going to show you that how to use create multiple entity records activity in UiPath. For the first one, I will use the previous activity which we have used, that is create entity records, and after that I will show you the another activity, that is create multiple entity records. So I'm going to show you some practical examples so that it will help you to understand. So watch this video till the end, otherwise you will not able to understand. Now let's get started. So as you can see here, we have three records available in the vendor master. Now we want to create multiple records in the bulk. So let's say we have an Excel file, we have 100 of records there, and I want to get all this data and then add those records in the vendor master entity at once. So how can we do that? The first way, I'm going to show you using that create entity record activity. Okay, so here you can see previously we used create entity record and we entered that expression in the input records and it inserted the data, right? Now I have one Excel file which has around 10 vendor records which we are going to use to insert or create entity records here. You can see here we have around 10 records and we are going to add this vendor name, email address. So currently I'm going to consider three columns. First, we have to read this Excel file because we have this data in Excel file only, so we have to read it. So to read this Excel file, we need to write here read range workbook. Okay, we can use read range as well, but we have to use Excel application scope for that. I'm going to directly use this read range workbook. Now here we'll be passing that path where we have this vendor master Excel file. Okay, now seat name, so we have seat 1, you can see, and then I'm going to create one data table variable, control K dt underscore, this is vendor master. Okay, now this has all this data available from the Excel file. Now to insert the data there, we have to take for each row. This one will take. Now we'll move this create entity records here. So this I'm going to show you, that is as simple, right? Now let's pass here the data table name, that variable name dt underscore vendor master. We have current item as a current row. Now what we are going to do here, we are going to replace this value with the variable. Okay, so in previous video you didn't learn that, right? Now I'll show you how to pass the dynamic value, how to pass the variable here. So we'll pass here current row of open close bracket double quotes. We'll be passing the column name. So this vendor ID. Okay. Now we need to convert this to the string. So we'll convert with the to string. Copy this expression so that I can just replace here. Now in the vendor name, we'll be pasting the same. Only we'll replace this with the vendor name. Now we'll move to the email address. We'll paste here the same expression. We'll just change that with the email address. Okay. Now if you want to include few more columns here, few more fields, you can add here. For the practical example, for this demo, I'm just going to show you 3 columns, which is required field, right? Now let's click save. Now you know that the process, what's going to happen here. Let me explain that. So first it will read this Excel file data stored in a data table, and then we'll use a for each row in data table which will loop through each row from the data table. and then it will be stored in the current row. Now here we are passing the current row of that column name. So each time each row will be in the loop, it will pass the value here and then it will create the entity. Now let's close this Excel file and then let's run that. We'll keep refreshing here so that I can show you one by one data is getting added here. So let's see. Okay, so 456. Okay, so it worked fine. Now let's go to the data service, and you can see here data has been added till V013. It means 10 records have been added here, right? So this is the one way that I have shown to add the multiple records to the entity, create multiple records to entity. Now the second one which we are going to use, that is using the create multiple entity activity. Okay, so let's delete all these 10 records and just keep V0123. Okay, now click on delete, just delete all these things. Okay, now we'll be using that create multiple entity records activity. So let's drag and drop the create multiple entity records. Okay, now what is the use of this activity? This create multiple entity records activity is used to create multiple records in bulk for the selected entity in the data service. So we'll click on this entity, select that entity. So why we are only getting this vendor master here? If you see here in the data service, we have 1 and 2 custom entity we have, but still we are getting only one. Why? It's because from the design tab, from the manage entity, we have only imported vendor master. If you import this, you will have access to import to use this as well. If you are not sure about all these things, just go with the previous videos. We have a series of video for this UiPath data service. Just start with the first video. Okay, now here it seems like we need to pass a collection of record. If we'll click on this advanced editor, you can see it requires in argument I collection vendor master. Now what is this vendor master? This is entity. Okay, so collection of entity, that vendor master. Okay, so it expects only collection. So here no need to use this for each row. We are going to take one assign activity here. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to first read this Excel data, store in a data table, and then we'll convert this data table data to the collection directly without using for each row. We are going to use, can you guess here? Okay, let me tell that. So we are going to use link queue. So first we have to create one variable which will store the collection of data. So if you're not sure what will be the variable type for this collection which can store here, you can do one thing. You can enter that desired variable name which you want to use. So I will say entity collection and then press enter. Now this will create one variable. You can see the type is I collection of vendor master, that is system.collections.generic.I collection and then UiPath data service.vendor master. Now we'll pass this here entity collection. Now what value we are going to pass, that you need to carefully look at this. So we are going to use this expression, that is from row in that data table name dot as enumerable select new vendor master, that entity with curly braces dot that column name equal to that value the field name, field 1, value 1, field 2, value 2, comma, field 3, value 3, and so on. And after that, after closing this bracket, dot to list. So we are going to convert this data to the list. So let me paste here. Okay. Now let me open this in the advanced editor. This is a data table that we are going to use, and this as a for each row, so you know that current item is row, or you can say current row, and then that you need to pass here current row. And these are just a field name from the data service entity, and this is the column name which is coming from Excel file, this one. So this should be matched with the Excel file or like your data table columns. Okay, if you need to add few more, you can just pass here same way, copy this, comma, paste that. Or what you can do, after pressing comma you can press space. Let's say you pressed one space, still you are not getting this, you will press one more time, and then you will get this options, and then you can select that. So let's say now I need to update the address. You can see dot address is added here, and then you can put like equals to, and then this row of address. Same way you can do that one. Okay, now we'll go with only this three fields. Let's save this. Okay, so only few things we are doing. Let me delete this data table is not required. Only we need read range workbook activity, which is going to read the Excel file and store in the data table. Second, we are going to use assign activity, which will pass it to the collection, and then this collection will be passed to this input records, and then it will be added, like it will create multiple entity records in a bulk in the UiPath data service to that entity. Now just go to the properties of this activity. You can see here we have timeout. So you know that timeout and related record depth that we covered in the previous video. Now we have continue batch on failure. This specify if data service should continue processing the remaining records when a record fails to create. If it is set to false, then it will stop that process even after the first failure. Okay, I will set it true, no problem. Here in the output, you can create a variable, you can store this here, and you can use it further if requires. Now we are good to run that. So let's run this. Let's go to the vendor master, data. Now let's refresh here. Let's refresh this, and you can see here we have all these records available, right? So we have successfully inserted 10 records using this create multiple entity records activity. You learned how to use create multiple entity records activity, how to convert data from data table to collection. Okay, how to use collections in the create multiple entity records. You learned how to use create entity records and then entity records in bulk using create entity records activity. So if you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more UiPath tutorials. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.